Hi, I'm here with Brittany Greenfield, founder and CEO of Wabbi. Brittany and I missed each other at RSA, but we're catching up now, and we're going to talk about secure code, which was a topic that was discussed indirectly in many conversations at RSA, what it takes to keep code secure. And so Brittany, maybe you could just lead off by telling us a little bit about yourself and about Wabbi, and then we can get into this question of what is secure code today versus yesterday.
Fantastic. Well, Hugh, thanks so much for having me. Glad we're able to connect now. I'm CEO and founder of Wabbi. We focus on orchestrating application security programs as part of the software development lifecycle. And this is why, we can talk about secure code. This is certainly why I'm passionate about it, is that when 9 out of 10 breaches begin due to defects in code, how do we make sure we're building a strong security strategy from the bottom up? And that's what led me to found Wabbi, and why I'm always happy to talk about secure code and AppSec.
Well, let's talk about what is the definition of secure code today, and how has that changed from what it used to be?
Yeah, I don't know how much of it is a change versus a maturity in understanding it. I think what makes application security unique is that, unlike other areas of security where it is very binary, is it secure or not, right? Is it locked or not? Is the wall tall enough and the moat deep enough? Application security, because of this relationship with development, where development at the end of the day is about setting processes and procedures so you can get that code out the door or in a timely, predictable fashion. That's really where that definition of secure code has had a bit of a misrepresentation over the years, to say, oh, secure code is locked up code. No, secure code is code that has followed a process and procedure to be developed in line with the security risk tolerance, really, of an organization, right? We see OWASP or NIST or ISO, and people go, oh, I'm ISO certified. Well, it says use a firewall, but how do you use a firewall to align with your business needs in application A versus application B? Because your risk tolerance is going to be different. And I think that's where the market and why, to your point, at RSA, leading into RSA, developing secure code has been and continues to be top of mind so prevalently, because it's that more practical alignment of cyber risk with business risk, right? We make educated decisions every day, trade-offs every day, and that's where application security becomes so integral on both sides of the equation.
Well, what do you think, if you had to identify one or more of the problems in keeping in development security in the development stage, what do you think are the issues facing development organizations today?
I think, and I'll oversimplify it, but the number one issue is context, right? Application security, there are a lot of great tools out there, right? And nobody uses the two tools the same way, because again, it's about what their organization's business risk tolerance is and how they manage for that. But the problem is that what we've done is overwhelm the development teams and the security teams as well with data, but no information. And so you need to figure out how to take all of that great application security information, which nowadays is not just limited to the scans, but really anything the application touches, firewall configurations, container security, et cetera. We could even go as far in a big picture vision to say citizen developers are part of application security and how they configure those applications, even if they're not coders themselves. And so we've flooded development and security teams with all of this data, but no information. I think the reality is that organizations have also come to accept is that you can only probably fix about 5% of your vulnerabilities. So the question is, what 5% do you want to be able to fix? That's most important now. What's the 10% you can fix later? And what's the 75% that you probably never care about fixing? But however, you want to make sure you record. So if you need to be able to implement a change in the future, you know that it was there.
Yeah, and I think it seems like one of the issues that comes up in AppSec is that the definition of what an application is has changed.
Mhm.
That, where, I mean, I think one thing that people haven't really grappled with enough yet is that an application can be touching, other entities through APIs and other components, and it's really more of a hybrid. And so the surface area is bigger that you have to defend.
Exactly, 100%, right? It used to be pretty limited, and it was also a pretty limited scope of organizations that would define themselves as saying, oh, I develop apps, right? We were talking with a prospect the other day who said, oh, well, we only have Salesforce development, right? Well, that's still applications that are creating breach opportunities for you. So just because you're building on somebody else's doesn't mean you don't own an application. And and I think the other thing is that people think, oh, applications, you have to be on a completely modern environment to worry about application security. No, the reality is even though organizations are going through digital transformations, everybody has some kind of hybrid flavor, right? And what you need is the opportunity, and that goes back to the context, to say, how do I secure this in this particular context? Right? My tolerance for Salesforce integration that I build in-house or some other kind of backend integration may be very different than what my crown jewel is that the business operates on.
And in your work, do you come across an issue that I hear about a lot, which is a cultural difficulty with developers and security? That what I hear a lot is, because I sometimes write about security as a corporate management issue, and that that developers are almost like a tribe, and like they don't want to do security. They don't want to. It's not that they're lazy; they're just busy. They don't want to deal with it, or they don't want to get blamed for stuff. And do you run into this kind of issue?
We hear it all the time, and we're starting to see some maturity as well. And and it's on both sides, right? Security is a tribe as well. And I think there are a couple of things feeding it. On the security side, you're dealing with a real scale issue that we're not solving anytime soon, unless we can eliminate all cyber risk, where for every 100 developers, there's only one application security manager. People, no matter how great they are, just aren't infinitely scalable. And it also means that if they're not appropriately using automation, they're never going to be able to keep up and direct their attention where they're needed most. On the developer side, and we actually like to talk about not just developer-led security, but development-led security, because everybody has a role in it. I think the big constraint there, where they feel that they're constantly butting heads with security, is that they haven't been given a practical way to do it. Suddenly, they've been asked in some situations to now own the security testing without any education. And if we could just turn everybody into a cybersecurity SME overnight, we could solve the problem, but that's not going to happen. And the other side of that is, some of those approaches where it's just developer-led, do it at the cost of security side and efficiency. The analogy I like to use in this is, just because we have unit QA testing at the developer level doesn't mean we've gotten rid of the QA function, right? It just means that we find the right time to pipe that in. So we actually did some recent research that showed when security teams empower development to own the day-to-day of just running with AppSec, right, to solve this scale issue and make development feel that they have a greater part and responsibility in it, and the ability to make educated decisions the same way they do about everything else, right? Imperfect security, actually. They're producing fewer vulnerabilities, where 71% have released software with vulnerabilities in the last 6 months versus just 50%. So it goes to show that if you can find a way to bridge that gap, and automation tends to be the number one way, because that's what DevOps pipelines are built off of, then you can actually remove that cultural divide.
And so how does Wabbi fit into this? Like, where do you guys do?
Yes. So what we do, as I mentioned, we orchestrate the end-to-end application security program. I think it's interesting, your cultural question, and we talked about tools as well. For some reason, in application security's rollout over the last 5 years, in this DevSecOps movement, people focused on the people and the tools. And as technologists, we're all trained people, then process, then tools. We focus on that process component to bridge that gap. I often say we translate security into development and development back into security. And as I was talking about before, with what secure code is, it's code that's followed a process, is in line with the current security standards. And even when you don't follow the standard, there's a process for not following that. So we automate and orchestrate that from the beginning and design all the way through live code and production, and the ability to roll out changes in response to either application level changes or security policy changes. It's actually what we call continuous security, which means that code's always ready to ship in line with the most current standards of the business, security standards of the business.
So let me run something by you that if you don't feel prepared to answer, you can pass on the question. But I don't know if you followed this, but about 6 to 9 months ago, there was a big flap at the Pentagon over an attempt to introduce secure coding practices at the Air Force. I don't know if you remember this. Somebody was fired. It was like a big stink for about 24 hours.
Yep.
And I was wondering if you thought, like, because one of the issues there, my understanding is they had a lot of legacy systems and a lot of legacy coding practices, and they couldn't just like magically make it all different. But how would you approach a situation like that, like a large, multifaceted coding bureaucracy?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think so just full disclosure, we actually began our phase 1 cyber last year with the Air Force. So we actually are pretty familiar. And very interestingly enough, the program rolled out by the DoD, it does look a lot like commercial level programs, right? So there's a lot of cultural transformation going on with the software factories. He's rolling up to platform 1. And I think the kerfuffle for sure, right? It goes to show you at any organization, this is not an overnight success story. You have to pick a maturity level and then start to track and try to bite it off with just one thing. And you take Air Force and you go, well, that's a lot of things to bite off, especially in a distributed environment where you're then also trying to have a centralized platform 1. And I think it goes to show, they're trying to deploy security at the same pace that they operate at, and which is important to do, but it doesn't mean you can boil the ocean. And I think it's a good lesson for any organization. Say, okay, 1, I actually don't have to be on a full DevOps pipeline CI/CD, right? The reality is that we adopt those things as mentalities, right? And you're still going to have a mix of legacy systems, new systems, and you need to find a way to be able to consistently communicate your security practices across them. The second is, do not assume you can just implement security overnight at the speed of your development teams because you buy a new tool. You got to start from the basics. And I think, the secure coding practices is a great place to start, because it's not fair to say security is everybody's job if they don't know what they're supposed to do. No amount of sitting in training or inline code editors is going to do that if you can't narrow it down to what is this developer or architect or ops person supposed to do in this exact moment. And I think that's really the critical component versus just saying, hey, is this ready to go from a security perspective? That's called continuous authority to operate. Every organization, public and private, has a similar concept. And that just forces bad behaviors if you're only trying to think about that one piece of the puzzle. In a lot of organizations, we see those are governed by checklists, Excel checklists, right? That's not anything. So I think, you do have to take a maturity-based approach to it. Just because we've been talking about it for 5 years, 7 years, right, doesn't mean we can say, hey, we've got the light bulb and we can do it tomorrow. It is going to take time.
Interesting. So you were very familiar with this situation. Okay. Well, good. Well, is there anything else you want to add to this?
No, I think that's it. It's always great. As I said, glad anytime we get the chance to talk about how to actually do secure coding nowadays, right, instead of just sort of the panacea of it.
Well, I think one thing that's come up in this conversation, I've heard in a lot of different ways over the years, is that what some people think of as security as really more of an operational task.
Mhm.
You know, that the security team might identify a vulnerability, but it's up to someone else to
Right.
fix it. But then you get into problems because it's like who's managing what and who's responsible for what and priorities and so
Right.
forth. So it
Yeah,
comes up in development.
you got to give security that accountability they need, right? That's the only way they know if their program's being run appropriately. But all the people that are actually responsible in AppSec for the doing of it, you got to give them more than just this has to get fixed, because they have, like all of us, have 15,000 competing priorities. Why does this have to get fixed now? Can it wait later? And we actually, and you know, I said before, right? It's a translation issue. It's actually where we took our name from as a company, the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, if you're familiar with it. It says, let us accept imperfection in the things that we create. Software, nobody talks about it, but software is inherently imperfect, right? You're not getting app updates every day because they've done some new feature on it. And so how can we bring that shade of gray to say we still have accountability, even if maybe the security process hasn't been followed exactly the way it was detailed, because it's imperfect. We're imperfect.
It's funny that you say that about software. When I worked at Microsoft, I worked very closely with a colleague who had previously been at Intel.
Mm-hmm.
And she was working on, we were both in the Microsoft Office organization, and her product, they said there's a defect in the product. And she flipped out because at Intel, a defect costs $500 million to fix.
Right.
And I said, no, this is just software. It's always broken. Don't worry about it.
Right. Yeah, you make sure, right? And you know, but the analogy is true with software. There are certain things that's going to cost you $500 million. So make sure everybody has the right information. You know,
right.
You see that where, you know, you get into this checklist mindset that we're talking about without appropriately gathering the information along the way. And we often hear from our customers that, you know, they've gone through an experience where they got to the end, got to that checklist moment, and security says, you have to fix this. And they go, that's not fixing that, that's rebuilding it because they misconfigured it from the beginning. Right?
Interesting. All right, wonderful, Brittany. Thank you for being with us today, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much.